If you spend any time in the photography space, especially in the last like 10 or so years, the name Fujifilm kind of feels like it's synonymous with like just photography itself because it is so popular. But a lot of people don't realize that even though their cameras are so popular now, they've been around for a very long time. Like for example, I've been a photographer for the last 8 or so years, and in that time I've owned a couple of Fujifilm cameras. And even though I started with Sony, the things I always heard about Fujifilm cameras is how different they feel from all the other offerings at the time. I don't think people buy Fujifilm cameras just because they look cool. They love the overall experience and the results that they get out of the cameras. And for example, like Fujifilm puts a lot of effort and time into having these film simulations that everybody just loves to have. And I mean, for good reason, Fujifilm did start producing film, so it makes sense that they would want to reproduce that into their camera bodies. Even though I've been primarily a Sony shooter for all of my professional career, I've always had some sort of Fujifilm camera in rotation. I had the X100F a few years ago. Then I also had an X-T3 that I used for all my gimbal work when I had it like 2 or 3 years ago, about 2019. So I really loved using Fujifilm cameras. The only reason I kind of rotated them out is because just different seasons of life. And I'm excited to have added the X100VI on my kit, not just because I've been looking for like a compact camera, and you know, I was really excited when this camera first got announced, but also just what made me want to come back to Fujifilm as like having like an everyday camera is just the sense of community I found online. And even though I haven't owned a Fujifilm camera for a long time, some of the closest friendships I made over on Threads or on Instagram have been with Fujifilm shooters. So it's not really about the company, but like the community that it kind of fosters. A lot of Fujifilm shooters are very open people, and they're you know, it doesn't matter what you shoot on, they're always down to share your work and share their work with you. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of add this back to my kit. But I also wanted to go back to Fujifilm cameras just because I remember loving the experience, and I just love talking to people online about it. Since the Fujifilm community is so open, I wanted to ask them why they choose to shoot with Fujifilm over other companies like Sony, Nikon, Canon, even Leica. So I've always been interested in other people's workflow and why they choose the gear that they choose. And you know, there's different answers for everything, but what was the most interesting to me is just the variety of work people produce with these cameras. So one thing to say is, you know, choose the camera brand that you choose. It really doesn't matter. It's all about the experience. If you enjoy a camera brand, if you enjoy Fujifilm, it really comes down to the photographer. So I really want to hone in on what makes that special. I also asked some of my friends who I met through YouTube why they choose to shoot with Fujifilm.
Hey, my name is Jonathan. And the reason I shoot Fujifilm is, one, because I'm a very vain person and these cameras just look incredible. So every time I go to reach for my camera, I just know it looks really good and it inspires me to go out and shoot more. The other reason I love it is because I love to shoot the film simulations and the JPEGs. I even edit most of my JPEGs from there. And it's just a super easy workflow for myself that I love. And the other reason I love it is the community is amazing. I started shooting on Fujifilm with my X-T3 almost 4 years ago, starting from nothing, and the community has just really helped me learn and grow as a photographer in general.
The best camera is the one that makes you want to go out and take photographs. And Fujifilm seems to do a great job at this. They make cameras that are genuinely fun to use and enrich the user experience. A big part of this experience is also to do with its film simulations. The ability to capture a moment and have it look and feel as if it belonged in an album for eternal memories, straight out of camera, is not something that can be said for many other camera brands. And best of all, there's no barriers to entry. Amateur and professionals alike can create amazing images with the help of an incredibly active, supportive, and friendly Fujifilm community. Thank you, Lewis, for having me on this video, and I'll see you next time.
When you consume a lot of photography-based media, like I do, like YouTube videos or Instagram posts, you always hear a lot of different varied opinions about cameras and why they happen to be popular. And I think out of all the cameras that I've ever shot with, I feel like the Fujifilm X100 line of cameras have always been like, well, in recent years at least, have been like this sense of kind of tension. And that's not something I want to bring to the channel. I love having different opinions and listening to everybody's different perspectives, but I have never experienced that with any camera rather than the X100VI. And I mean, I do know there's like a scarcity with this camera. It's super popular, so it's not a reason why I would choose to shoot with this camera. And I was just really excited to kind of go back to the X100 line after being away from it for so long. You know, I'm aware how divided the camera community is about this camera and how overhyped it is and how people are buying this just because it looks good. And you know, I've bought cameras in the past because it looked good. Doesn't mean I'm still shooting them with now, but I think it's cameras like these that really keep the photography hobby and the photography business and industry afloat. So I welcome all the photographers who tend to come to photography just because they like shooting on this camera and they find that they really enjoy photography in the first place, and you know, they get to enjoy the art form. So this video is not going to be a review about this camera, and not really like so much like the user experience, to be quite honest. I just want to share why I like to specifically shoot with it, why I bought it in the first place. And honestly, I know the majority of people watching this video, they either already own this camera and they just want to see other people's perspectives. They're waiting for their order because they're back ordered everywhere. I received mine in April and I pre-ordered it like 20 minutes after pre-order started. So it was quite a bit of time before I got my pre-order. And so like, if you already know that this camera is not for you, I know, you know, it's, I don't want to invalidate your opinions on it, but you know, there's so many cameras out there nowadays that do basically the same thing. Like all these sensors are very similar in size. A lot of APS-C size cameras, they're very similar, full frame. It just depends on what your needs are. And you know, I don't necessarily think there's any relatively bad cameras, just cameras that are not for you. But I like the fact that it's relatively the same just because it's familiar. I haven't used it in a couple years, so I really liked the design when I first bought it. And that was the thing that really drew me to this camera originally when I had the X100F. I really liked the design. There was not a lot of cameras out there that had this similar design. Like I was kind of like curious about shooting film, but I was in college, so I couldn't really afford it. And at the time, it was not as accessible as it is now. And so there was a lot of variables while I wasn't shooting film, but I saw this and I was like, that sort of looks like a film camera. I'm gonna buy it. So I had the X100F for about 6 months. I didn't find myself using it much just because of where I was in my photography journey at the time. I was a wedding photographer and videographer, and I still am, but at the time, I wanted all of my cameras to be for weddings, and that really didn't fit the kit. So I like the fact that the X100VI looks very similar. I really love the design and the way that this camera looks. The tilty screen is still there. That's something I wish my Q2 had. So that's something that I really was looking forward to shooting on this camera, because there are times when I'm shooting with my Q2 where I wish I had a little tilty screen, and there's not enough about the Leica Q3 that draws me to that camera to upgrade. So I really love the fact that it's in this camera. One thing I didn't touch on the video originally was one of the big aspects of why I wanted to come back to the X100VI, and that's the hybrid viewfinder. You don't see those in a lot of modern cameras, especially mirrorless cameras, and that's something I really wanted to go back to, because I found it that while I owned the Ricoh GR3, one of my biggest gripes about it was the fact that I was always looking through a screen when I was taking photos, and that's just personally the way I take photos. You know, you can zone focus and stuff like that with those cameras, but I really wanted to feel connected to taking photos, and so having a hybrid viewfinder is something that was really important to me. Like 90-ish% of the time when I'm shooting on this camera is just on it's not even live view, it's on the optical viewfinder, just because I just love that experience, and it's something I really wanted to kind of re-explore, especially in this chapter of my life, being a dad. It just makes me feel more connected to a moment and a scene. So it's one of the big draws to it. You know, I don't really like the EVF on this all that much. So, you know, it's a big aspect why I don't usually use it, but just having the choice whether or not I want to use an optical viewfinder or an EVF if like it's super bright out or something was something that was really interesting to me. The place I use my smaller cameras the most is out with my family, and the place I'm out with my family the most is at Disneyland. So having a small compact camera or a small setup all together really goes a long way. Like, I'm using the Osmo Pocket 3 to film myself right now, and while I'm really self-conscious about it, it's a really good exercise for me to explain why I use the cameras that I use and the purpose that I use them for. And that's the great thing about these cameras, right? Not only they're small and portable, but if you take away the popularity and the hypeness that it comes with shooting an X100 cameras, if you take all that away, it's still a really fun camera. So it's really fun to shoot. And if you're new to photography, it's a great way to get into the field of photography and to learn new things. So if you want to use this camera in automatic, you can do that, but it has all these manual controls you can use to learn like your exposure triangle. So I think it's a great way for not just new photographers, but experienced photographers also to be able to keep things fresh. So you're not really bogged down with all your big gear. You want to have something that's fun and light and still kind of give you all the features that bigger cameras have. You get them in this. I think obviously most cameras right now in the market do very similar things, but the user experience is what differs in between different brands. Like if you take cameras like Sony or like Canon and Nikon, they all prioritize different things. Like for example, I've been a photographer and videographer for the last almost 8 years, and for the whole time I've been primarily a Sony shooter, and that's surprising to a lot of people because I never talk about it on the channel, even though it is my main video camera that I use for my talking heads or for my gigs that I do or my weddings. All of that stuff is shot on my Sonys, but whenever I'm not doing something for work, I don't really take them out anywhere. They just sit in my office waiting for the next gig because they just don't inspire me to do things for fun. They're great tools for me and reliable tools, but whenever I want to do something that's more inspiring to me, I want to use different cameras. So whenever I'm doing things that are not paid, I want to experiment with different brands. So I have my Leica Q2 for that, and now the Fuji X100VI. And for reasons that I've already covered in this video, but you know, the autofocus is better than my Q2. And whenever I'm out with my kid, I want something that's small and portable and it's still really fun to shoot. I had the GR3, but I found that the autofocus was not consistent enough for whenever I'm out with my kid. Before I had kids, you know, it was serviceable, and it has such a beautiful sensor and a great lens, but for my needs now, it didn't really fit the bill. So I had to let that go. And I think that's what makes these cameras so much fun to shoot on, because you still get all the features that you get with other cameras, but they're just really a lot of fun to use. There's some stuff to be said about how much Fujifilm is trying to pack into this camera. So I do get the criticisms about how this camera doesn't feel like the next version of the X100V, and it feels more like an S iteration, like an iPhone. And I think those people are right. I mean, Fujifilm did pack in 6K video on this camera. Now you can shoot in log, but it still kept that old battery, so it's not really that efficient when you're shooting video. But honestly, the way that I'm going to use this camera, even as a video shooter, I don't see myself shooting much video on this camera. It's nice to have, but just like the Ricoh GR3, I never shot video on that. I mean, one thing is the video was horrific. It was not very good. But with these cameras that are more photography focused, I don't feel the need to want to explore video and take that many video clips. Like, it's not really a true hybrid camera. So for those, I kind of tend to lean into other cameras that I own just because they're a lot more efficient to shoot for and that kind of thing. But if you want this camera to be like a hybrid end-all be-all camera, and while it has a bunch of features on it, you are going to be short. It is going to be a lesser experience because they're putting so much in here that is not really, it doesn't feel totally fleshed out. Like, videos, great to have, but with the small battery, you're not really going to get that many video clips on here. So part of me wishes that they would have at least improved the battery, because while it doesn't really bother me to bring a battery bank or to invest in another battery, I think Fujifilm could have easily delayed this release another year or so and really beefed up the battery or fit those features that a lot of people wanted. Something I was really looking forward to playing around with on the X100VI was the film simulations, and honestly, I don't really use a whole bunch of different ones for this camera. I know it's a big shock to a lot of people because that's one of the big draws to the camera, but I find that a lot of the popular ones online, they do the job, so I don't really explore that many more options. Like Reggie's Portra, if you don't follow Reggie, you should follow his channel. It's something I put on my camera from the beginning, and it's one of the most used ones that I use for most of my stuff. I also made one for the style of shooting that I like, or the way that I like to color my photos, especially if I'm sharing it with family and friends. That sort of deal that I made. It's not super in-depth and super hard to put on there, but I do like some different color palettes for some of my photos. So I'll show you a few examples on photos with my custom profile, and I'll also put in the description all these different settings, so if you want to try it, you can try it. So I can show you here on this camera the custom settings that I have. Reggie's Portra is number 1. I use that quite a bit, and the other one that I use is called Dirty Pop, which I developed myself. Again, it's not super in depth, so it's a pretty basic one, but if you like similar colors that I do for like the things that I post, that's not so much like the stuff that I edit in RAW, you might like this. So all of these settings are in my menu, but you can find all of them in the image quality tab in your Fujifilm camera. So image quality is set to Fine plus RAW. Film simulation is Reala Ace. I really like this film simulation, even just the base of it. It's a really beautiful profile, and if you're someone who doesn't like to color grade or really edit your photos at all, it's a really great look. So if you don't want anything that's super harsh or contrasty, definitely check that one out. The grain effect is weak small. I don't typically like to put a lot of grain in my JPEGs, typically because I share a lot of these photos with family, and you know, I don't want to stylize it too much for them, because you know, if they're gonna print them or anything, I don't want them to like have any issues. I just like to give them something very basic, that way they feel comfortable printing that or putting them on their phones. The next thing, color chrome effect, it's off. Color chrome effects blue, it's off. White balance, it goes from auto to like white priority. Usually I keep it on auto, and I do have the red and the blue kind of shifted a little bit. Red at 2 and blue at -1. Dynamic range, it's at 200 something. I don't know what this, I'm still playing around with this, so like I am not an expert on this, so play around with it. I don't really know what I'm doing in this part. Right now it's set to 200, so I'm just telling you that it's at 200 just so you get similar results. Tone curve. This is my curves that I like to use for this camera. Highlights, it's at +2.5, and the shadows is at +1. The curve is a little different than you typically see in other profiles, just because I prefer my shadows and my highlights to look a certain way. So that's what they're set at. Colors at +3. I do like color in my photos. Not something that's overly done, but I do prefer to have a little bit of color in there. Sharpness is at -1. Again, it's just a personal preference. If you like your photos to be a little bit sharper, you can leave it at that. But with my JPEGs, I like them nice and soft. So it's something I really prefer. Clarity is at 0, and high ISO, it's at 0. So that's my basic profile. If you want to use it, it's called Dirty Pop. I'm a big fan of 90s pop, 2000s pop. So if you're a fan of NSYNC, that's basically what that name is from. Dirty Pop. Yo. So yeah, there's like a slight pop of color, nothing super harsh, but if you want to check it out, it'll be in the description below. And a lot of these photos that I shared, I'll put which ones have my profile on them. I've really been enjoying shooting with this camera. It's my everyday camera that I take everywhere. Like, this camera is so small, and as a dad, I feel like a lot of my stuff, whenever I'm out with my kid, I really just want everything to be simple, easy to use. They still have a relatively good image quality, and it's just so I can actually spend time with my family. Whenever I'm out, I take this in my long weekend bag that I got from Moment. I really enjoy that bag. It's nice and small. And then if I want to shoot video, I shoot with the Osmo Pocket, which is the camera I've been shooting with this entire time. So if you're curious at all what that camera was, or if it looks a little different from my other videos, it's the Osmo Pocket. So yeah, everything fits in the small kit, and that's one of my big draws to this camera. And I mean, if you know Fujifilm cameras, you know that most of these cameras have the same sensor. So it's all about that body styling that you prefer. Like this has the exact same sensor as the X-T5, which I tried. I did not like. So I really liked the photos I got from it, but it's just the experience was not for me. I feel like I preferred the X-T3 when I had that one, but I really enjoyed using the X100VI, and I think if either you bought one, you know that you like it. If you're waiting for one, I think it's worth the wait. I feel for you if you're still waiting for your camera all these months, but hopefully the time that you're waiting is not much longer. And yeah, there you have it. This is my review sort of the Fujifilm X100VI. I hope you got something out of this video. I know it's not really a review, but you know, for whenever I watch YouTube videos, I like to watch things that just feel more like the people usually use the camera rather than overly producing it. I'm trying, and it's just for me. So like, I'm trying a different formula. So I appreciate the feedback if you have any feedback. And yeah, that's gonna be it. If you have any questions on the X100VI, any other cameras, leave it in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you. And yeah, if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.